Welcome to Built by People Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Daria Rudnik, and this show is for HR and L&D leaders in fast-growing organizations, those building real impact from within and shaping AI-ready organizations. If you go to dariarudnik.com, you can download HR and AI Transformation Report 2026. And today we have a very special guest, Ed Howard, founder of One Breath Leadership, a new human-centered leadership framework combining neuroscience, psychology, AI, and 3 decades of Zen training. Before becoming a founder, Ed spent 20 years as regional head of compliance in global investment banking, where he saw firsthand how burnout, overwhelm, and cognitive overload were affecting leaders. And today he teaches practical tools for clarity, resilience, and peak decision making in the age of AI. He's also the author of One Breath Leadership book, and he helps leaders apply ancient wisdom and modern science to perform at their best. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Daria. Nice to be here.
Well, it's great to see you. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. I have so many questions, but please tell us about your journey.
My journey. So I guess I came to leadership development a bit of a long way round. As you mentioned, I spent almost 2 decades in investment banking and financial services. I worked up to regional head here in Singapore of compliance, conduct risk advisory. But before that, I spent 5 years in Japan, and at that time, it was kind of before my banking career. I encountered Zen practice, I guess, in my kind of early to mid 20s. And those two tracks probably sound like they shouldn't fit together really. But as time has gone on, it turns out that it can be the same inquiry, but from different directions. So what banking kind of showed me was that under sustained pressure, threat response or stress response hijacks your perception before the person really even knows that it's happened. And so you see really capable, intelligent, values-driven people narrow their honesty, miss signals that they wouldn't normally catch, or that they would normally catch, and then make decisions that later on they don't really know why they've done it. And that's usually not a character problem. My Zen training and study around it and practice was that it was physiological and cognitive, and really there wasn't a solution designed for that environment. Zen was really designed for monasteries and people in forests and mountains. And so although there's been development in that sphere over the last 20 years in terms of mindfulness training, I always thought that there could be more, and there was more to it. And so what One Breath Leadership is all about really is a practical method for interrupting that process, to give kind of people the baseline and the discipline to then be able to use it in kind of high pressure situations rather than in workshops, or as some training that you've got to do for wellness purposes. So I work with business owners, senior leaders, and leadership teams to maintain that decision quality, emotional regulation, integrity. And then the kind of added bonus of this is that the method in itself really helps sort of guard against burnout, because you're learning to be in the moment all the time rather than resisting all the stress that gets thrown at you on a daily basis. The book and the app that are coming out on the 11th of June, they're a distillation of that work. And I've written it for skeptics. So, people that have tried meditation before and it's not suited them, or it's driven them mad, or they just think that it doesn't work. I was kind of really conscious of all that as I was writing it. And so, I think I've come up with something that will change people's minds on that, and it'll be easier for them to kind of use.
Well, I love what you said about that. It's not character that makes people, it's that they do some bad decisions, make some bad decisions, maybe treat their colleagues not in the best way. And it's not because they're bad people, but because of the pressure and physiology and how our brain reacts to stress. One of my yoga teachers told me once that it's easier to be a saint when you're in a monastery. Try to stay saint when you are in this real world of lots of stress and troubles. And I guess that's exactly what you're doing. Try to help people to keep this sanity and good character while being in stressful situations.
Yeah, I experienced that myself and during my career in banking, and tried different methods, failed a few times. I lost my temper a couple of times. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be that person that everyone thinks loses their temper easily, or, well, in my case, I felt bad about it for ages. So it's really giving people the tools so they don't get to that stage. And often, in my experience, it kind of creeps up on people. Although somebody may explode or, slowly begin to make Machiavellian decisions or think that everyone's against them or whatever, that doesn't happen like in the moment. That happens as the kind of stress and feelings of isolation, feelings of lack of control slowly build over time. And so if you can put a kind of stick in the spokes of that before it happens, and then teach people a good technique or a good habit to get into, it's going to prevent that from developing. And it should also help people who are just like so under such huge cognitive loads in senior positions, to kind of stop for a moment, be aware that the external world is beginning to control them or beginning to dictate their physiology and their psychology and so on, sort of gain that power back for themselves. And so I think it's hopefully going to be really useful for people going forward.
I do agree. The question is like how practically it is possible in the corporate environment. I mean, corporate banking, those guys in the expensive suits running around doing very important job that lots of money is on stake. And how do you do that? Like you can't just stop and okay, it's time for me to meditate. It's time to do some practice. What is
So the thing is that I think people have this idea that they need to meditate and they have to, be in a nice room and light a candle or some incense and be on a cushion and so on. But what I did was kind of strip the meditation process back down to the bare bones and look at what they're doing physiologically and psychologically, and it really comes down to the three aspects, which is the use of the breath, where their attention is, and how they're using their mind. So breath, mind, and attention. And the science is there. If you take each one by one, which is what I do in the book and in seminars and so on, if you take each one by one and understand what they're doing, you already have an understanding as to how you operate as a human being in a high pressure environment. And then really it's just a question of bringing those three things into alignment once a day to start with. And you simply do that by taking a deep breath, and that immediately has kind of physiological and hormonal effects on you as a human being. So breathing with your diaphragm rather than up in your chest kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system, and sends messages to your brain that nobody's attacking you and that you can relax. And it'll also immediately kind of slow down release of adrenaline or cortisol and so on. I make the joke all the time that we're all breathing anyway for most of the time, and there's an interesting point to that joke too, but we're all breathing anyway. So all we really need to do is train ourselves to, one, do it properly, do it in a physiologically good way. And if you've done yoga or you've done martial arts or you've done any kind of sports, you will have encountered some of this before anyway. The attention part, the way that the method teaches it is to put that attention on your breath. So rather than on something external or a problem that you're solving or the 100 things that are swirling around your mind, just for that one breath, you follow it down into your lower belly and then back up again. And that essentially short circuits that kind of cognitive function that most of us spend all our time in, especially, if we've been grown up in the West, been educated in the West, trained for work in the West. We're in that all the time. And what meditation and yoga are really about is shifting your mind into a different state than that kind of cognitive wheel spinning one. And the wheel spinning is really useful for problem solving and analysis and so on. But this other one is better for creativity. It's better for kind of seeing things through a broader lens. And so by learning that you can switch between the two, and there's actually a third one as well, but to start with, learning that you can switch between the two and noticing, okay, I'm in that hell for leather 100-mile-an-hour mind right now. I'm about to do a pitch, or I'm about to speak at a board meeting, or I'm about to deal with a difficult employee or a difficult boss. And using the breath and switching that mind is gonna have an effect on what happens to you in that moment. You're less likely to get your hackles up. You're more likely to be calm. You're probably not going to lose your temper. So people see this like immediate change from something that is so simple that I'm almost embarrassed to talking about it and bringing it to the world. But often the best things in life and the best things you learn are ridiculously simple. And how did I not realize that before? How did I not before?
Very simple, but it's not easy. And practicing, like, be mindful about your body, where tensions are in your body, how those tensions influence your feelings. That takes practice to understand how these things work and actually be able to influence them.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, if anyone ever starts a meeting with you, or you probably do it at a yoga class, they will say to you, "Okay, everyone, like, let's take a deep breath." I've never met anyone that doesn't feel better after it, right? And again, it's so simple, but we just don't do it. We don't we don't give our minds that rest, and we don't give ourselves that kind of 10 seconds or 12 seconds to breathe. And then, what I do then, in terms of a process, is have people anchor that in a similar way to kind of mindfulness practice or James Clear's atomic habits, is that anchor that breath to stuff that you do every day. So how you lock your door, whether you open the door onto your car, when you sit down at your desk, and then you're essentially stacking those breaths. I don't know, in a like 2-minute or 3-minute meditation, you'll maybe take 6 breaths a minute, so 18 breaths. Now to spread that out during a 10 or 12-hour day, every time you get in the lift, every time you open your laptop, it builds up so quickly that people are surprised at how they're doing. And what you're essentially doing there is rewiring yourself in the same way that you would in a longer term meditation practice. You might not go as deep in terms of the levels of calm and so on, but you're rewiring all those reactive parts of you spread out during the day, and you'll get most of the same benefits. So it's a different way of looking at meditation. If you look back in Zen texts, it's all there throughout, the 1500-year history, that it only takes one breath, or it only takes a few seconds to gain insight or gain clarity. And so really that's all I'm doing is showing people a slightly different way to
So I don't have time for that is not an excuse anymore.
No, it's not. It's not. And don't get me wrong, I'm as guilty as everyone over 30 years of, we put that pressure on ourselves. If I don't do 10 minutes, it's not worth it. Or, if I'm not in the right environment, it's not worth it. Or I don't feel relaxed enough, so I'm not going to do it. There's almost an infinite number of excuses. But what I found is if you do it on just one breath, and people are going to do it anyway, and so it becomes much easier to create a habit than traditional meditation or mindfulness practices.
Well, I have a question about like the corporate well-being programs.
Yeah.
Lots of money goes there, apps, retreats. What do you think is working and what's not working in this kind of programs?
I think we've touched on it a little bit. I think they're designed for comfort and not uh, sort of high impact or high stress situations. So they work really well in a quiet room with a facilitator, and then when somebody walks back onto a trading floor, or a Monday morning, and somebody's put a call in your calendar at 7:30 because they've got no self awareness, and you've got back to back meetings, then the gap between a retreat or a specialized program and the reality is so big that it just disappears. Um, I think that you have to treat it as a skill that you can build and use anywhere under any conditions. So, I think mindfulness is great, and I think it can work. I'm just not sure if it fits maybe as well with a high paced corporate environment or business environment as it could do. And then I think the second thing is that there's a cultural issue that mindfulness is often bolted onto an existing culture of hustle or high speed or aggression. And organizations actively reward the opposite of what mindfulness teaches you. So, speed over reflection, quick decision or certainty over curiosity, action over a kind of thoughtful response. And so you can give people 8 weeks of mindfulness and then you send them back into an office where it's very high paced and it's moving quickly, and where maybe taking a breath before responding is seen as a weakness. And so you really need something that you can fit in that is so micro that people won't know that you're doing it. And so a framework that addresses that culture explicitly becomes sustainable rather than seeing them as separate. Here's your mindfulness training. This will be good for your wellness and health. But you still need to ace it day to day in terms of what you're selling or what you're building or whatever it is you're doing in an environment. So I think there has to be a bit of a shift at the top in terms of building those two things in, and some are doing it really successfully, but I think there's more work to do. And leadership development teams, and HR departments have to kind of bear that in mind in terms of what they're choosing to send their people on. Are they really going to get? Is it really going to work in the kind of heat of the moment or not?
Yeah, I mean, that is really a big question of corporate culture because you can teach people how to breathe, but if you still like punish for mistakes, if someone says, "Oh, you have only 2 meetings today," I mean, and do you even work? Things like that. It's kind of, if you have a busy calendar, it means you're working. If not, I mean, what are you doing? You're just wasting time.
That's a good point. I talk about this too, that you wouldn't have a professional athlete who is operating at the absolute peak of their sort of abilities, but they never have a day off, or they never have a massage or an ice bath. Recovery is just as important for kind of performing as the performing itself. And I think there's a lot of I think I'm qualified to say this, kind of male macho lead swinging in terms of your calendar's got to be packed and it's got to be go go go, and it's nonsense. The science is there to show that it's nonsense, and I think the best people in any field are the ones that balance when to put their foot on the pedal and when to take it off, and you really have to do that if you're going to avoid burnout.
It's also like the fear. Like, if I'm not busy, I'm replaceable. Do I show that I bring something by showing that I'm busy?
Yeah, that's not healthy. That's one of the things that I think has to come from the top in terms of fear-based culture. Tends not to be very good for its people. It isn't very good for the leaders eventually that run it. If you're around long enough, you see those people burn out or fail spectacularly, or whatever. And so what you're really looking to build is a non-fear-based culture where recovery is as appreciated as performances. But there has to be a balance. You still got to perform, and the science says, and my argument is that it's about a balance of the two, not just one or the other.
And we were saying about like minutes to breathe in, breathe out. We're not saying like stop working for half a day. Just
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sure you have that time for recovery.
yeah. That reminds me of the thing about not breathing. So there's a professor or an academic in San Francisco that did a study on this thing called email apnea. And essentially, what it is when you open your email box and see a message from that you don't want to see, and that doesn't have to be an awful one. It can be just one from that person that like drives you nuts, or from that boss who you've got to be on the ball with or something. Humans have this like built-in thing, and it's from when we lived in caves and were worried about being attacked, is you hold your breath. And it's because you don't want to give the game away in the prehistoric sense. That you don't want somebody to hear you breathing. But because we're simple creatures, and obviously corporate culture and sitting at a desk has accelerated so fast over the last kind of 40, 50 years, we still do it. Some people get 700, 800, 1,000 emails a day. I don't know what percentage of those are the ones that you go, I don't want to deal with that. You end up holding your breath an awful lot. And when you hold your breath, all those kind of your hormone spikes, your carbon dioxide and oxygen levels become out of whack. And I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head. It's something like during the course of the day, you become 30, 40% less effective purely from a physiological standpoint, because you've not been breathing properly. So, one, I think that's it's really interesting. It's a fascinating bit of research. Two, I know I did that when I was working in London and in Singapore. Sometimes you find yourself going, because you've been working that hard and completely forgotten to breathe because you were so focused on something. So just being aware of that. Again, if you start doing the one breath process and almost drill it, and I recommend that people do this like when they turn the computer on or open the laptop for the first time and sit down, is that they do kind of 1, 2, 3 rounds of like deep breaths, just to kind of tell their body, this is how I want to breathe for the rest of the morning or for the next hour or what have you. Again, you're preventing that buildup of cortisol. You're preventing that kind of cognitive lag. And it means that when you do go into a meeting or, you do something that's important, you're not going to be in this kind of hunched over, oxygen starved state.
These are great tips, like taking a breath in the morning, making sure you're in the right state, and anchoring those breaths with usual habits that you already have, and kind of building another habit on top of the habits that you already have is much easier than just building a new one from scratch. And pay attention to your breath, to your mind, to your attention. And eventually, it'll help you be calm, even when a message from a boss comes in the middle of the night and you're, oh my gosh, what is that?
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing is, when you start to do it, you realize that you're in the moment a lot more often. And when you're in the moment, you're not worrying about something that just happened or something that might be about to happen, which is that fear thing. And so quite quickly, people see that it kind of changes how they feel at work and what their kind of approach to everything, and they can't really explain it because it seems so simple, but it will have that effect. And when you do make a mistake, you act in a way that I wish I hadn't done that, or wish I hadn't sent that email, with that caustic tone or whatever. You're much more likely to kind of catch that you've done it see the humor in it, or or feel the shame in it, and then move on and be less likely to do it again the next. I think it's good for that too.
And anyway, moving on is the main thing. We can feel different, experience different emotions, but being able to come back and keep going, no matter, and feel well, that's important. Well, that was an amazing conversation. I'd like to ask you some rapid fire questions about you, person or a coffee person.
So I drink coffee, but I would say I'm a tea person.
Dogs or cats?
So difficult. God, I think my wife might have words with me. I'm going to go for dogs. And I've not got as much experience with dogs, but the small amount of experience I do have was amazing with golden retrievers. So yeah, dogs.
Would you rather take a message or a phone call?
It depends who it's from.
What did you want to be when you were a kid?
When I was in primary school, I wanted to be a vet.
And what's one rule you've broken but don't regret?
It's probably the I'll be back by 10 o'clock rule.
So, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and experience and sharing those tips about how to manage yourself within the stressful situations, how to prepare yourself when something is important is coming up, how people can find you, how people can learn more about you and what you do.
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Edward Howard, or you can go to onebreathleadership.com. There's a contact form there and a bit more info about the book and the app. By all means, drop me a line or get in touch that way, and I'll be very happy to have a chat with you.
Cool. And we have all the links in the notes to this episode. So if you like this show, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and stay tuned for the next episodes. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Daria.